doing a look that I like to call Big Nose.
Okay. What were you going to do
Just
today?
a casual, everyday look that's really easy to do.
So
We have started, by the way.
Oh, we're starting it.
you ready?
No, it's been going. We've done most of that, so.
Okay.
So welcome to your first demo here. Today we're going to do a nose that is slightly different than Kira's own nose, and we're going to talk about the steps in which you do this, because it's really important that as you're watching, you're writing down like what happens first. And that there's definitely a benefit to you taking your own notes. So write it in your own way, and then Audrey's going to transfer that as well. I want you to double check what you've written to what Audrey has written. Okay? That becomes really an important part of the process. What have I missed in that? Okay? So the first thing that you're going to do, right? Have you ever worn makeup before?
Yes.
Okay? You're going to have now we get the notebooks. Okay, that's a good thing. Okay? So assuming that you didn't take a note before anything today, right? You might want to go back and ask yourself, what are the given circumstances of a play? Right? Because those are all the things we've talked about for the last hour. Right? Okay. So note-taking is an important part of this process, right? So you've worn some makeup before.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you're allergic to?
No,
Okay. So,
not that I know of.
okay. So not that I know of is really important, because the first thing that you should always do is a makeup test, right?
I am allergic to trees and dust,
Trees and things, okay.
like stuff that grows in the summer.
Okay, so pollen, mold, and things like that.
Yes.
Okay. So it's really important that you have the conversation with the actor beforehand, right? And in some cases, in most cases, you want to do a makeup test, right? So what I would advise is that whatever makeup that you're doing, you take a little bit and you put like behind your ear, and you leave it there for 3 or 4 hours. You see if you react to it over the next 24, okay? Latex can be abrasive on your skin, right? Does anybody have a latex allergy? You do.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, so you're not going to be able to ever put that on your skin.
I can put it on my skin, just kind of like, if I leave it on for too long, like hours, like Band-Aids, over days, give me rashes, that's it.
Well, you're definitely going to have to do some makeup tests,
Okay.
okay?
Yeah.
Because you may not be able to do that, you know, and you want to do that and make sure that you are okay with whatever you put on your face. Anything in your kit, you want to test, okay? Have any of you ever had spirit gum on your face before? You have, okay? Spirit gum comes from the sap of trees. That's the initial part of it. And I wish I could tell you there was a different industry standard, right? That is the industry standard. Rosé and spirit gum are how you apply hair, you know? So that is the way it works. So, you know, if an actor has serious allergies, they don't get the job. You know, that's what happened in The Wizard of Oz. You know that to be true, right?
Wait, no, what happened?
The Tin Man, the original Tin Man, was Buddy Ebsen, who was the old guy in the Beverly Hillbillies, right? He was allergic to the aluminum dust they used, which turned out to be good for him because it wasn't good for the actor, right? So he left that job, okay? So if you're allergic to something, you can't use it, right? That's just the way it goes, right? So you want to test anything that's in your kit, okay? Normally people don't have a reaction to spirit gum, but you never know. You might want to test that too. So the first thing that you do is make sure that you have the conversation with the actor about what they might or might not be allergic to. And then secondly, you want to make sure that you have a material safety data sheet for everything in your kit, all right? Because if there is a reaction that you don't anticipate, you want to go to the ER with that material safety data sheet. So the first thing that you do is have the conversation with the actor about what they may or may not be allergic to. The second thing is make sure you have your material safety data sheets for everything in the kit. And the third thing is make sure you do a test, okay? So those things happen before you even start. That has to happen on the first day, okay? Before you meet the actor, or before the actor comes for that makeup call. The real makeup call happens on day 2, okay? After everything's been cleared and you have everything you need, right? So in terms of your procedural plan, it's day 1, day 2, okay? So also on day 1, if you have a prosthetic piece, like the nose that we're going to use, which we'll eventually use this, okay, you would match this to the actor's skin or to the design, and you would pre-paint this, okay? So when you're going to do it, you don't paint to the very edge. You leave the edge free so that you can paint that after it's been applied, but most of it you would paint beforehand, let it dry. So that also happens on day one, okay? Little final touches you can apply afterwards. So the first thing that we're going to do is put a little bit of spirit gum on your nose. And what I'm going to do is do it right here, okay? On this part of your nose, because we're just going to build that up a little bit, right? With nose and scar wax, you'll realize that it's not as pliable as the latex appliance will be, right? And what you can do is much better done with small things than big things. Like if you try to do things over your nostrils, right, it's not going to work that well, okay? So that it's not going to move naturally, and it's going to be hard on the actor, okay? And eventually, because the actor's nose is going to move, it's not going to want to stay there. It's going to want to like try to separate, right? So this is best in small little quantities, right? After that, you take a little bit of cotton swab or a cotton ball, and you take the cotton apart from it, and you want to kind of tear it apart so that all the threads of the cotton ball or the cotton swab tip that you've taken off, right, are kind of loose and open. I'm just shredding it in my hands, and I'm going to begin to put that like right on her nose, right, so that those threads are kind of up and open. And here, on the other side too, because we're going to let this dry, and we're going to clip some of them off. Right? And we're going to actually work that wax right into some of those hairs. And you don't need a lot, right? And they don't need to be long. So we're going to take some off eventually and cut some off. Right? But we'll just leave them dry like that for now. And this is going to help keep the wax on. Right? When it comes to your nose and scar wax, and this is right in your kit, I'm trying to do a lot of this based on what you have in your kit. And I'll get a bag of cotton balls for you because they'll last forever. But in a pinch, what I just did was take a Q-tip, and with a scissor I just took the cotton off of it. You don't need much for this, okay? If you decide, and I think one of you said that you want to build the whole like forehead out, you can do this with nose and scar wax, or you can do that with nose and scar wax, right? In which case, you would do it up in through here, right? You would apply it here, and you would build the forehead out with nose and scar wax up there, right? The thing is, right, the bigger the area, the less mobile that actor's face is going to be, right? So you might do it, you know, in two sections. Maybe there's a crease someplace or a wrinkle someplace that allows some movement, right? But it's going to be much more possible to do this on the hard surface of the face, like the nose bone, like the cartilage here, the forehead up here, your cheekbone, or your chin, right? If you try to do it like in a soft place where your face moves, it's not going to work, okay? So you might get a wart out of it on your cheek and spirit come up there, but it's definitely going to move, right? So where it moves, because the nose and scar wax is not, and they call this also mortician's wax, that's what a lot of times they'll use in embalming and things like that. If somebody's like had a bullet hole to the head, they'll fill that up and they'll mask it that way. But they call it mortician's wax. So if you see it the same name, it's the same thing, okay? But these techniques definitely work better on a bone area of the face, right? So you decide where you're going to put it, right? Once this is dry, right? And here's the other tip about spirit gum. When I'm using it in a show, right, I don't use it in a little bottle like we have here in class. Did any of you have questions by any time? Did you? Oh, just ask, okay. These little containers, right, they'll last quite a while, but because you don't need much spirit gum when you're doing it, right? But When it's out of the bottle, it's really thin, right? If I'm doing it on stage, like, or backstage for putting 10 wigs on backstage, what all you always do is pour it into a cup. And when you leave it open, right, it will get much thicker. The thicker it is, the less time that you have to wait for it to dry, okay? So when I was doing bow stratagem and all the guys had 18th century wigs, and the wigs were on netting so that you didn't see a hard hairline. They're all ventilated, meaning each hair gets woven into the net in a single strand all across the forehead in that area, so it looks like there was no wig, right? You don't get a hard edge of a wig that way. But the netting then gets placed over the forehead, and you glue the netting down and the netting disappears, right? So you have a really natural looking forehead and a natural hairline that way. You always do a little bit of spirit gum on the net and on the scalp. And if you have to wait for that to dry a long time, it can be miserable for the actor, right? So I like to set it up so that there is a big mug with a lot of spirit gum in it that's thick. And over the course of 3 days, open air, it will get thick. Cover it loosely with some saran wrap so nothing gets in there, but it will just, the air will make it thicker, right? So it becomes more like, I don't want to say a paste, but it just becomes thicker, more pliable, okay? And it's not going to drip or anything like that, okay? So that's just a spirit gum tip. In your kit, you have a nose and scar wax amount that is, I think it's 1 ounce, okay? So this is more than enough for today. The mistake that most people will use and will make is that they will use way too much of this, right? You don't need much. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of this out, right? And I'd say that might be, I don't know, less than a half a teaspoon. So I might do a little bit more because we can always pull it off, right? And here's one of the big rules about hygiene. You never stick your fingers into those makeup pods, okay? You want to take them out and put it onto your palette and mix on your palette. If once you stick your hand in that makeup pod, A, it can only be used on you, but then B, whatever you had on your hand is now in your makeup pod, right? So it means you've really made a lot of bacteria happen in your makeup pod, right? So keep it clean, right? So this is less than a dime round, okay? So I'm just gonna put this here, and then I'm gonna begin to pull some of this off. And in a bind, if you are trying to make something happen quickly, right, this is fine, right? You can always hit this with a hairdryer on cool, right? So that's why I have a hairdryer over there too. How are you doing, Carrie?
I'm doing great.
Good, right? And I'm checking to make sure that it's not tacky any place, right? So you have that happening there. Just gotta pull some of the length off. I want to leave those hairs up and try and get them up like that. Can you see that on the video?
Should I turn to the side?
Turn to the side a little bit. Right? Can you see how those hairs are kind of up like that? Right? Stay there. Okay? And what I'm going to do, don't move, right, is just trim them down. Right? Because we don't need them to be that big. All right. Can you see that?
Can you see it?
Okay. Cool. So once we have that done,
Do you want me to set up that black thing behind her?
no, I think we're good.
Okay.
Oh, you mean that?
Yeah.
Sure, let's try it. Right? Okay. But then they won't be able to see, will they?
Yeah, they won't be able to see the back of her head, but they should still be able to see.
Okay. Yeah,
Right.
try it. Since this is the first time we're doing this, we're going to figure out. This is actually a separate dressing room that can be set up like that.
Oh.
But I don't know if it will stand on its own like that. Oh, okay. Do it hold like that? Okay.
You can also bend it around the chair if you need to lean it on the chair.
Hold it this way. See if we can just get this How about like that? Okay. Can you see okay? Can you guys all see over there?
Yeah.
All right. Good. All right. Cool. That's great. All right. So now we're going to take the KY jelly, all right? So that this is a product that it's used in makeup a lot, right? And as we start to work this little sphere into here, right? I'm going to press it down. I'm just going to add that little bit to her nose. Right? So as that begins to work like that, and I press it down, it's going to grab onto some of those threads. But you can see what happens is it really sticks to your fingers, okay? So this is where the KY jelly comes in. And you put a little bit of KY jelly onto your palette, right? And a little dab on your finger is going to allow me to move this around and press it down without sticking. So what you don't want to do is get the KY jelly underneath it, because then it won't stick to what's underneath. Feel okay? Make sure we stick that in there. Get the KY jelly where we want. I'm just going to add a little bit more to that. And gradually can move that around. So you want to work from both sides. Can you see that? If my head's in the way, let me know. So this then can be formed, and this is you actively sculpting right on the actor or on your own face. Okay. And this is going to spread back, and you can see how small that was, but do you see how big it looks on the end of her nose?
Your head in the way.
There you go. So I'm going to use the back of my nail, begin to blend that down, and then to make sure that from all three sides, it's the shape that I want it to be. And here we go. Turn this head a little bit. So far, so good. Do you see how that changes the profile right away? And up here, again with the back of my nail, just to smooth that into the skin, and it blends it really nicely into the skin. The more that you use, right, the more character-like it's gonna, instead of being, you know, like a reasonable possibility, right, you can move into like the land of, oh, this is a real caricature pretty quickly. So you want to be careful about how much you use. And use a little bit more spirit gum. And you'll find that the trickiest part is making one side look like the other. The symmetry becomes really important. I'm trying to keep it also off her, the area of her skin that goes down onto the actual nostrils. Okay, this is called the nasolabial fold, and you want to avoid that.
Why?
Because it moves, right? Like as your mouth moves and as you would speak, all of a sudden what would happen is this would begin to crack.
Right, now you breathe too. Right?
Yeah, it's just like the natural part of your body that moves. So here, this there. Double checking again. And this is where makeup artist is sculptor, painter, and artist all together. You know, so it's like you start with a sketch, right, then you move into the actual sculpting process, and then you paint it. And there's something really different about this than a piece of latex. And the latex, when you sculpt this in clay, and you would do this within the model of the actor's face that you have taken a mold of, and you sculpt on the actor's face in clay. And as you do it, once it's done, you take a little tool, and there's different size pores in all of your body, and like you look at that actor's complexion and you say, okay, where's the pores that are bigger, and you have a different tool to dot all through the clay, and all the subtlety of that comes across in the mold, right? Here, you don't do that, right? We'll paint all those little dots on it, okay? So you have all of that happening there. Pretty good. So once that is there, oops, I'm sorry, we've got to use these guys here. Right. I want to make sure my hands are clean, and that as you go back, you want to test and look at both sides. You want to see if it's smooth over here and over here, and I want to just look over here one more time. Turn this way. All right. There's a place where there's a little indentation, so I'm going to try and smooth that out. A little bit more to the way. There. To there. And have any of you ever had a sculpture class? It's interesting. I was just reading this article in the United States Institute of Theater Technology, and they were talking about, at the last conference, where costume design majors should be. And they couldn't figure out if they should be in art, in literature, and or in theater, because so many of them require sculpting skills and painting skills and drawing and all of that. So a double major in art and drama is a really good thing for a costume designer, especially if you're thinking of makeup. So I just want to double check this area here, make sure this is really smooth as it comes down, right? Now I'm going to ask you to move your face around a little bit. Does that look like a caricature, or does that look like it's her? In terms of the scale of the rest of her face, it just changes the shape of her nose, right? So what you can do is consider, doing lots of different things to your nose. If I take the spirit gum.
Are you holding that the whole time?
See that? Yeah, that might be able to hang. Hang. Yeah, you hang this around it somehow. Right? So I'm going to take this, I'm just going to move this down just slightly. Just get all of that nice and smooth. Something there. We have the technology. Let me go figure it out. Look to the side again. And other way. Okay. So we've added a little bit up through here, and it's made it rounder in this area. Okay. Are any of you familiar with the story Anne of Green Gables?
Yes.
Right? Who's the nosy neighbor? What's her name? Mrs. Pruitt.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Have you watched the new one on Netflix?
No.
Yeah, Emily.
Is it good?
It's so
Really
good.
good.
I haven't seen the new one.
It's really
Right?
good.
So good.
Yeah.
It's really realistic.
But I did it for the Louisville Children's Theatre Company, which is called, I believe it's called Stage 1. And it was in the big opera house. So we wanted to take Mrs. Pruitt and give her a little bit more character. And since she's such a nosy neighbor, we pulled her nose down a little bit more and gave her a little bit more of a hook. Right? So it was very subtle, but it was really fun for that character. Now I'm taking this and I'm just moving that down a little bit more and squaring out the bridge of the nose. Okay, so that's kind of fun. And we can make that a little bit more square just by doing that. There. And I'll square off the other side a little bit. And I just keep dipping back into my KY jelly on my palette over here so that is handy all the time, and I can keep this kind of a little bit more square. Just to change it. So depending on what you've designed, right? Then you can add to it or change it, do whatever you want to it, right? That leads me to handing these out to you, okay? So you can take a look at these. These are all the different pieces of research I picked off the internet. Most of these even came, I think, from Pinterest, right? This is our, right? And they're all different kinds and shapes of noses, all right? So that as you're looking at this, right, the first page is all drawings from different directions, right? If you look on the back of that, you see at the top some examples of like caricature. Okay? The next one, they begin to add light and shadow. Okay? And so as you turn the page, you'll see the light and shadow begin to happen. On the back of that, there's some examples of ears and eyes. Right? On the next page, you see the nose drawn very geometrically, and then ultimately change it into the real shapes of the nose. So if you go across the page, you see the nose in different dimensions, right, for each one of those. The next one, which is really fun, right? They begin to add, laying out the basic places of lines, and then the actual like soft shadows, and then highlights as well. So that's about what we're going to do next. Right? And then you can see this page with all of the different like highlights and shadows from start to finish. So this is really where we're going next. Okay. So we're going to look at Kira's skin tone and begin to say what are the things that we want to match or try to come up with. And got it? Mm-hmm. And the best way to do this is to take, again, a knife. Make sure you're going into your pot with your knife. Right? It can be a palette knife, anything like that. And take that and put it right on your palette. So I've got one little spot there for my first one. I'm going to take my second color and do the same thing. Again, take a little bit of this, right, onto my knife, put it on my palette over here, and my third color, the darkest one, and again onto my palette, right? So you're not wasting what's in your pot, and you're not dipping your fingers in there. That's real important. So as we work through that, now you're going to take what they gave you. There are two brushes. I'm trying to do this with everything in your kit. Okay? These brushes, just keep them undone. Right? And then what we're going to do is take our palette and mix, right, a little bit onto here, into the brush. Okay, I'm going to just test on your skin tone and see on your highlight areas which is closest. And then
Is the color clear?
Can you guys see the color of that okay on this?
I don't know that the color is great on that.
No.
Right, but we can kind of get a sense of the color of the this. Can you see any of the color? Can you guys see the color
Is it
difference at all?
better if I'm more direct?
No, it's better, sure.
Right. I'll mix up the second one here. I'm gonna just put a little bit more over here just to test that. And actually that's pretty good. You're very fair, so that makes sense. Okay. I'll mix up some of this one.
Yeah, sort of.
Dotting it a little with my finger there too. That's a little bit golden.
It's like,
Does this help? Is that better? Can you see the differences?
well, maybe
Yeah.
turn off that other one. Yeah.
That?
No. Is that? No, maybe it's that one then. Like keep that one on and the other one off. That better?
You guys have to say yes or no.
Oh, wait.
Can't really, I mean,
You can't see it?
like, if that, like, that's a bit more better.
To be fair, it's fairly subtle even looking at it.
That's true, it is not.
Well, and the thing is, what you want is to match the skin tone.
Yeah.
So you might not see it. Okay? But as I put it on, all of her face is gonna, like any of the subtle light and shadows are gonna go away. So it's gonna look really flat. Okay? So I think I'm gonna use the middle tone, or the highlight tone, the brightest tone, which I believe is ultra fair. Okay? So once I take this, okay, I'm gonna dab it down through here on that, all the way down through here.
That you guys can see, right?
It's funny because I'm looking at you tap on my nose and I can't feel it.
Whoa.
And you'll begin to see any inconsistencies here where you might have to like go back and smooth things out a little bit. We'll also do some brush work too there. Can you turn to me a little bit? Now, in most cases on your skin, right, it doesn't need to be this heavy, but to cover the wax, it has to be fairly heavy in there. So, we'll take that. Okay. Go under your eye here. Close your eye. I tend to be fairly gentle with this, especially around the eyes. You just want to dab, you don't want to rub. And I'll go up through here. Right, when you're on bone, you can be a little bit more aggressive. Right? But just be careful. Remember, this is a human being that's sitting in front of you. If your actor backs off and moves back, that means stop. Right? The other thing you always want to tell your actor is, if you're uncomfortable at any place or time during this process, you just tell them it's okay to say stop. Right? Have any of you ever applied makeup like this at all? A cream-based makeup? Any of you?
Just like regular makeup. It's
This
cream-based?
is a cream base.
So what would be the base of like regular foundation?
A lot of times it's just water. Or cake that you add water to. Right? Let's take this. I'm going to use a fresh sponge. I'm going to begin to blend all of this. I like to blend in like a circular pattern. Now, there's also a step, I didn't use it because I'm not doing like a fashion makeup, but if you have an actor who's been through 4 days of tech, they might not have had them on the first day of rehearsal, but by the third day of rehearsal, they're probably going to have some bags under their eyes or just shadows, right? And your job is to make them look terrific, so you might want to use something called concealer. And concealer is something that goes onto the face before you put anything on it. And it's usually a lighter value,